And I think that, I'm hoping that in your campaign you will explain to people how the debt is destroying their economic future. Many people in this room are old enough to remember the last period of hyperinflation in the late 70s, Carter. Back in 1980, mortgage rates were in the teens, treasury rates were close to 20, prime rate was above 20.
22.
Today, most of our mortgages, credit cards, car loans are linked or indexed to the treasury or the prime rate. So when, right now, I can see that credit card rates in the 40% range will become the norm. For 300 years of this country's history, every time our government has printed money to bail itself out, it has always, without fail, been followed by a period of hyperinflation. So if you think that mortgage rates in the teens and the prime rate at 20 was high, you ain't seen nothing yet.
If I can address that, I think you laid out the issue well. What he's saying here too, because of these deficits and the debt is an accumulation of all these deficits, but because of this high debt, there is a great fear. There is a great fear that this will, at some point, lead to higher rates of inflation, particularly as the economy heats up. You will likely see inflation. And then what will often happen, and this is what I think gets to the interest rate issue, that you talked about printing money, monetizing the debt, so to speak. When you talk about these high rates of inflation, you also remember what happened in the late 70s and early 80s when Chairman of the Federal Reserve at the time, Paul Volcker, was going to wring inflation out of the economy. And how do you do that? Through interest rates, raise them. And so that's when we went through that period of so-called stagflation. We had high unemployment, high inflation, and high interest rates. And I do worry about that scenario. I worry about it very much. And that's one reason why I think we have to get our fiscal house in order. Because I'm not here to say that we're going down the road to Greece. I mean, I think we've all turned on the television and we've seen those horrible images of what can happen in a nation where their fiscal house is not in order, where their spending is simply unsustainable, and because they have failed to make decisions to correct the problem, austerity is being forced upon them from the outside, and it's not pretty, as you watch on television. So some things that we can do in the short term on the issue of at least this current deficit. I mean, I want to cancel unused and unspent portions of the TARP. We've been repaid by many of the banks. I want to take the money, use that for deficit reduction. Any monies that were not spent, don't spend it, deficit reduction. We have about, last time I checked, about $266 billion worth of unspent stimulus money out there. Again, I'm for deficit. Back to deficit reduction. I think we're going to have to cap some of this domestic discretionary spending. Since in December of 2009, this past December, the omnibus appropriations bill increased domestic discretionary spending in this country by 12%, on top of a stimulus bill that funded many of those same programs. I mean, you just can't go on this way. And so, I mean, how about just at the very least freezing domestic discretionary spending, and then also cutting some. I mean, those are some things we can do, there are areas where we can cut it. I'd also argue too that this year a freeze on civilian pay for the government. Civilian pay, freeze it for a year. I would say it was about $30 billion. I mean, there's some things that I think we can do in short order. And I think we need to come back to the day of the line item veto. I mean, many states have that, the governors have that authority.